Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Babbling Irons match review show with myself and Sloth. West Ham United 0, Tottenham Hotspur 3. It's the one we want to win, let's be real. There's a few fixtures we'll look out for at the beginning of the season. Obviously, Spurs is one of the big ones for both teams. And yeah, I think there's a lot we can discuss in this game. We're going to break down the goals and highlights and the key talking points around red cards, disallowed goals, and ultimately Graham Potter's not excuses, but I want to label it as lack of accountability with what's happened, especially in this game and the last couple of games, with the win at Nottingham Forest as well, and how that compares to this defeat against Spurs, because it's such an important game for the fans. And yeah, losing 3-0 in any manner is not going to go down well with the fans, especially given the starts of the season we've had. So yeah, we're going to break down everything. If you like the video, leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content. And just to start with, Sloth, let's look at the lineups, because we obviously shifted to a back four against Forest after a lot of disgruntled and agitated noises from the fan base with the back three that we started with this season. So we stuck with the back four. Obviously, Hermansen in goal, Walker-Peters, Mavropanos, Kilman, Diouf. Midfield three of Souček, Ward-Prowse and Fernandez playing in that number 10 role. Somerville on the left got his first start, which was nice to see. Bowen back on the right. And then Paqueta was almost playing as the false nine up front, which we've seen him do a few times. And also, we've also seen some success from when he has done that so far as well. And then you look at Spurs' lineup, you've got Vicario in goal, Porro, Romero, Van der Ven and Spence, Sarr, Pellegrini and Bergvall as a midfield three, and then Simmons, Tell and Kudus as their front three. So when we look at the lineup, Sloth, were you happy with this? Because we got Somerville starting. Granted, we didn't have, a recognised striker on the pitch, with Paqueta playing there instead of Fulkirk or Wilson. And then Bowen was back on the right-hand side, and we saw Fernandez move into a more central area of the pitch. Were you happy with the lineup before the game got started?
I'm happy with the formation. Like the 4-3-3 is clearly the way we need to go. But in terms of the players, it's abysmal. It is shocking stuff. And you know how how Graham Potter is looking at our team sheet and going, yeah, we need Souček and James Ward-Prowse. You know, I could kind of understand if, because Potter seems to love James Ward-Prowse so much, if he had picked either one of them. And I think we're in this situation where we just keep picking two players who are very clearly not able to play with each other, and for some reason we're hoping it will work and something will change. You know, this wasn't what we did in the Forest game. That's not what got us results. We're playing a better side than Forest, with all due respect to Forest, and for some reason we've picked the slowest midfield combination possible. And you know, Mike and I said in the preview that one of the key areas was the middle of the park, and we have completely and utterly shot ourselves in the foot before the game even begun. And people will say, oh, you know, we got to half time and it was goalless. Well, Spurs didn't have to do anything whatsoever. They didn't, you know, we didn't challenge them at all. And it's precisely because of that midfield. It invites so much pressure upon us. It puts Spurs under so little pressure. You know, the only thing that you can really point at is that Souček won a couple of aerial duels, and James Ward-Prowse is just anonymous yet again. So I mean, I even posted a thing that said about sofa score ratings and why you can't trust them, because he had a 7, I think it was. He had a fairly positive, like how anyone can watch that game and go, actually, you know what, he's done quite well there. He was West Ham's best player. That is a clear understanding of like clear display that you don't understand football, or you don't understand how it works, because as we said, the formation is right, the selection is terrible. Like,
what would you have done differently with the selection? Because I think I completely agree. The midfield pivot of Souček and Ward-Prowse doesn't work and won't work if we continue to play that. I know we probably won't want to play that. We'll probably want to play one of those at the base with Paqueta and Fernandez as our other eights, and then with an actual striker playing striker. So what would you have done? Would you have thrown Magassa in? Would you have brought in someone like Potts? What would you have done differently there?
I mean, we have got this situation with Freddie Potts where we just don't know what's going on. You know, he seemed to be doing well in pre-season and suddenly seems to vanish. And it's a bit like my internet connection at the moment. We just don't know what's going on. Like it's crazy. Where I think Potts offers a lot more than James Ward-Prowse in this midfield, and people can say, "Oh yeah, but he's not proven at this level." Well, James Ward-Prowse is proven at this level that he is not good enough, or he is not impacting games in the right way. So, what can possibly happen in the sense that Freddie Potts isn't proving himself, isn't
Mm.
it, or doesn't warrant a chance? You know, Magassa, I think, should have been the player to come in, or should have gotten more time than he did. But I think when you have a pre-season for someone and you can see what they can do, Potts has to be given a chance because it's probably going to come at Souček's expense. I don't think it should. You know, I don't think it should have. It's inevitably going to now that
Yeah.
he's got this red card. But I, I, I think James Ward-Prowse is an absolute hamstring on this whole starting 11, and it's just not good enough.
Yeah, let's take a look at some of the highlights and stats from the game overall. So Spurs obviously dominated a lot of possession. Again, the red card definitely influenced that in the second half with 64%. Expected goals of 1.29 to our 0.6, 14 shots to our 7, 5 shots on target to our 4. Just one big chance created for West Ham compared to Spurs' 2. Both sides missing one of those. Obviously, a lot more passes. 13 corners to 2. I think Spurs had 8 corners or 9 corners in the first half alone. And yeah, we're going to touch on that in a second. Before we get onto the goals in the second half, obviously, we might as well touch on the corner situation, and we'll talk about Graham Potter's comments after. But their their disallowed goal comes from a corner. I haven't included it in here, to be honest, to break it down. But for you, was it a goal slough or was it rightly disallowed?
It's a goal.
Yeah,
It's very weak defending from everyone. This is sort of defending sort of from Maguire, you know, where he would go down under the slightest of contact, and there is a bit of argy bargy in there. There's a bit of handbags at dawn, but there's nothing to rule out this goal. It's an embarrassing goal to concede. It's even more embarrassing that VAR got involved and disallowed it.
yeah,
I think it's a joke, and
yeah,
it's this is why I find the quotes or people saying that we defended well so disingenuous,
yeah,
because we go in at 1-0 if at halftime, if that goal stands, you know, we probably go in with a much higher scoreline because we know how we capitulate when we
yeah.
concede.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And we just look so fragile. Like, I know we might as well touch on what Graham Potter said. So he was asked about the set pieces, and I think we've now conceded 6 goals from set pieces so far this season, which is double the amount of any other side in the Premier League so far. So it's a clear issue. We look very, very fragile. I mean, every set piece in that first half, or every corner in that first half, I think every West Ham fan was probably holding their breath because we just knew that we were going to be under pressure. And Graham Potter said that we dealt with a lot of them well. I think we dealt with a couple of them well, but the majority of them we were severely under pressure, and he failed to kind of allude to the disallowed goal as well, which came from a corner, which was really poorly defended from West Ham, and Spurs capitalised on it in the second half. And the Spurs players have since come out and said, one of the biggest talks in their halftime team talk was centered around the set piece threat that they are offering and how we're not particularly approaching the set pieces in the right way with the amount of confidence that we should. And I think that kind of segues quite nicely into the first goal for Spurs in the second half, because again, we're just being undone by the fragility of this West Ham defense, especially from set pieces. And you'll be able to see it very clearly here. We're continually to operate with this zonal marking, which should have been red flags from the first half, to be honest, because Spurs were getting a lot of joy from it anyway. So all they've done is they've just recognised we're keeping four players there, pretty much in line with the front post. You've got Mavropanos, you've got Kilman, you've got Paqueta, 3 of our arguably best players in the air, all are within that zone there. And Spurs have just said, right, we're just going to block off a couple of players at the back post, leave Sarr free, float it in a little bit deeper than we have been, and he's just going to be free. And that's exactly what happens. You can see there, as soon as the ball's whipped in, our front three players, you can see there, Paqueta, Kilman, Mavropanos, they're all turning around because the ball's just gone past them, because obviously it will in that situation. And then Spurs are just really clever. So they've got Van der Ven and they've got Bergvall blocking off two of our players. Again, not fouls. It's just very clever set piece routine and really poorly defended from our point of view. And Sarr, who we highlighted at the beginning as the player who is back free at the back post, just has a free header. And he just walks in, heads it in, and we find ourselves 1-0 down. And again, if I just take it back to this first screenshot, Sarr's in this picture here. There has been no communication from West Ham that this is an issue, whether that's Graham Potter or the set piece coach from the sideline, not identifying this. And also the players taking a little bit of accountability in this situation, especially, someone like Hermansen, or people issuing this defensive kind of setup, whether that's Kilman, Mavropanos, whoever's going to be leading this, or what leader there is on the pitch to do this. So how frustrated were you to concede in that manner against Sloth and, find ourselves 1-0 down because of a really poorly defended set piece, especially a corner once again?
I cannot understand how we're not addressing this. It's not like we've looked good at any point from corners. I don't know what Graham Potter is watching that would make him think, oh, we dealt with some things well in the first half. We conceded one that was chalked off by VAR. How is that? How can we be watching this and thinking, yeah, this is going well? It's like that meme of the dog in the fire, where it's oh, this is fine, and not doing anything about the fire raging around you. I am baffled, quite frankly, and I know that people might say, well, we know Graham Potter likes an old school defender. We know he likes someone like Dunk or Webster to be in there and just get on the end of it. Well, you don't have one. You don't have one. So you need to address what's happening. You need to change your system or change your style of defending from set pieces to address it, because it's very clear now that Mavropanos isn't going to do it. It's very clear that Kilman isn't capable of getting on the end of an aerial ball. And if we're going to revert back to this 5 at the back, well, bloody hell, we've recruited poorly for it. If we'd gone out and got Charlie Cresswell, then you'd think, okay, there's a player who likes to get his head on the end of something. But we went out and got bloody Igor. It was some of the worst aerial stats in the players that we were linked with. And I just, I really think that, no, this isn't all on Graham Potter, because again, at any level of football, if you can see it's going so badly, and if there are players in front of you who are completely unmarked, you should be talking, and you should be saying, pick him up. Even if you've been told you defend this area, if there is danger anywhere on the pitch, you should be able to see it and address it. But it's clear that either we haven't got the characters to do that, or we just got people who are looking at it and ignoring it. And that's why I mentioned the dog in the fire meme, because it's this sense that these are very easily addressable problems. It's not like this is a case of we're being completely outplayed. It's not like we're being destroyed by a player who is giving a 10 out of 10 performance. This is easily fixable stuff that we are just neglecting to address, and it is terrible.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And that's one of the biggest alarming things here, because if you're a player, and if anyone that's played football is watching this, you're going to be absolutely screaming at your teammates if you find yourselves in this position with Sarr at the back post, just completely isolated. That cannot happen. I completely agree, Sloth. The players have to take some of that responsibility on the pitch, and you should be able to recognize in that moment whether they're hiding, which I think they are doing a little bit, and some of them, those characters on the pitch are hiding at times, and they're hiding behind other players and trying to find ways in which they can hide. And it's easy for us to say, well, we've been coached to set up like this, so they're following instructions. But it's not as simple as that. It's not as black and white as that. You can't just set up the same way every single time, because a team like Spurs or any team in the Premier League will just go, right, they're doing that. Let's just change it up a little bit. Let's just put someone at the back post and we're going to find space. But we find ourselves 1-0 down, frustratingly. We responded quite well to that, I thought. We had a couple of decent chances. Obviously, Bowen's chance was saved. We had a couple of headers from Juve and Kilman that were close, but nothing really concrete. And then the red card, which is frustrating because that completely changes the momentum of the game as well. Obviously, Souček takes a very heavy touch in the middle of the park and is trying to lunge back and get in it, but ends up doing this. He misses the ball and goes in very high on Palhinha's leg. Is it a red card for you, Sloth?
Yeah, look, I don't like freeze framing or like images to show if it's a red card or not, because it removes the context from the moment itself. However, this is just really poor. Like, it's poor from Souček. It's, as you mentioned, it's a really bad touch, but he is endangering an opponent. You know, that is far too high. His studs are in, and whether or not people, you know, agree with me and say the game's gone soft, by the letter of the law, he's endangering his opponent. His foot is very high and his studs are up. So it is a clear and obvious red card, in my opinion. It's a complete brain fart. And yeah, from a player who, you know, I make no secret that I love, but this is so poor. And yeah, it's bad enough when we concede a goal and you can see the heads drop, but when the red card came out, it was like you might as well have just walked off the pitch there, because we certainly didn't put up a fight.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you next, because obviously the red cards happened, right? Fine, we've got to readjust. I think this is a few minutes after the red card, maybe 2 or 3 minutes after the red cards happened, and players resumed from this point. And we've changed to almost like a 4-4-1 at this point. So we're still within a similar shape without Souček. We've just dropped Paqueta and a little bit deeper, and Fernandez deeper, and Bowen's gone as the striker in this instance. So firstly, we're not really, I wouldn't say we're massively in trouble in here. Like, we're set up fine. We're recognizing, right, we're playing on. We're clearly a little bit deeper than perhaps we would want to be if we had 11 players on the pitch. But you're thinking, right, you're down to 10 men. You're losing 1-0. You have to get through this period, because even at 10 men, you're still going to be able to create chances. I mean, we were down to 10 men against Lyon for God knows how long, a couple of years back, and we managed to get a draw and actually take the lead in that game. So it's not out the realms of possibility that we could have got back into this game, even with 10 men. Not saying we would have done that, because we didn't look like getting back into it with 11 men, but there you go. What follows is probably the biggest frustration for me from this game, regardless of what's happened. I know the first goal, the set piece, really frustrating. The red card's frustrating because of the error that it is. But this is just, I just can't really fathom how we've conceded from this situation. So the ball comes across to Romero. You can see here, Mavropanos, who people have actually been saying has been playing quite well, which I actually agreed with, especially against Forest. But we always know that he's going to be susceptible to this kind of thing and switching off. And all Spurs do, Bergvall just makes the run in between Kyle Walker-Peters and Mavropanos. You can see in this screenshot here, Mavropanos has glanced over his shoulder and has seen the run of Bergvall. So we've seen that. And we can see that Kyle Walker-Peters is kind of stuck between the two, because he's got Simmons out on the left-hand side and he's kind of tucking in between that centre zone. So to be honest, this is all right. Like, Mavropanos has seen the run. He's going to be able to track it. We've got a nice 4-4-1 shape that we're trying to be compact with. So this is fine. You know, we're adjusting to the new game state that's happened. But then Mavropanos kind of just gets caught ball watching a little bit and gets caught square. Look, it's a fantastic pass from Romero to pick this pass out. You know, it really is a really good pass. Obviously, he hasn't got pressure on the ball at this point because we've dropped into 10 men and changed our formation. But how are you letting a player run off the back of you after you've looked at him and still get to the ball ahead of you? And you can see here, Mavropanos is just caught square. It's a fantastic pass from Romero, but how on earth we're conceding from that situation where it's literally a pass from pretty much the halfway line? This could almost be a free kick routine, set piece routine. And it's just gone over the head of Mavropanos and between Kyle Walker-Peters. Bergvall then finds himself in this position. And then Hermansen, to be honest, I think we need to ask questions here as well, because he's just kind of in no man's land and it's just so easy to lob him. It's just so easy to get this over him, and it's a good finish from Bergvall. And Spurs go 2-0 up, and at that point, it's pretty much game over. But how are we allowing that to happen just 2 minutes after we've gone down to 10 men? Surely you're on high alert there, not allowing a player to run in behind you after you've already seen him as well.
I can tell you exactly why that has happened. It's because this is a targeted approach from teams. They not only know that we're weak in the air at corners, they know that we're weak in the air from open play. So Thomas Frank has said, get balls into the box. If you see space, hit an aerial ball into it. This is such a simple goal to concede, like you rightly say. And Mavropanos has been one of the better centre backs, but this is why that is such a worry. And this goal is schoolboy stuff defensive wise. Part of the ball into the box, it is a good ball. Like I don't want to sound like I'm just completely detracting from that, but you almost instantly know that what's going to happen is he's going to have an effort on goal. He's going to put his head on the end of it. So why Hermansen comes out or takes those few steps off his line is baffling to me. He doesn't need to be there. He's not attempted to claim the cross in, because it would have been a no man's land one anyway. So why are you not getting back onto your line and giving yourself the best chance to reach any header that comes your way? But the fact that he's just been allowed to ghost in, it's either no communication from Kyle Walker-Peters, or it is just complete switching off from Mavropanos. And Mavropanos is a massive unit of a man. How is he being beaten in the air? It's kind of like what we said about Aguerd and Maenda at Sunderland. These are duels that you should not be losing. It's not a case of he's got Cristiano Ronaldo-esque leap. It's just poor defending.
I don't even think it's like an aerial duel, to be honest. I think he's just been caught out, and then he's trying to play catch up. Like you see here, he's almost out of. He's not really challenging Bergvall at this point. He's just completely lost the run of him.
But the point is that the reason I mention that is because he's quick enough and strong enough that he should be able to, make up that space and get something on it without fouling it. And it's just awful reading the ball. It's so many errors from so many individual players. And if Kyle Walker-Peters has given him a shout and said, man on, or you can't say man on anymore, but if he said that you've got a runner in behind you and Mavropanos has just ignored it, well, it's more on Mavropanos. However, you still track that run a little bit, even if you've said there's a man running. When you're defending poorly, you know that you can't exactly trust that player, so you still have a little bit of a run with the man. You still try and keep up, and that's what's so frustrating is there's no communication, and if there is, it's meaningless communication, and then there's no quality. There's no quality to cut out that cross. There's no quality to save the attempt on goal. And I mentioned Lewis Dunk and Webster. They're the kind of goals that those centre backs don't concede. Even Charlie Cresswell probably sees that there's a runner there, and even if they cock it up by heading it into a poor position, they get something on it at least, and they probably create a scenario where either the keeper has to take him out or try and get on the end of it. But it's just really poor defending. And I think, like you rightly said, after a sending off, you regroup. But I'm gonna hammer home on this because James Ward-Prowse leaves such a gap, and he continued to do this. Souček did it as well, but they were just stationary. And Souček's already off the pitch at this point, but James Ward-Prowse is not doing anything. He's not tracking runners. You can go back throughout various games. He is not tracking anyone, and I'm really scratching my head at this point as to why we're picking him, because what I'm hoping, to be honest, and I don't like saying this, but what I'm hoping is that we sack Graham Potter and we bring in Nuno, because Nuno didn't rate him. So if we bring in someone who's got a bit more energy, will actually track a runner, then there's a good chance this goal doesn't happen. You know, he runs completely unchallenged through a midfield and through a defence. That should not be happening at any top level of football. So I'm just baffled by it.
Let's move on to the third and final goal. Thankfully, I think most West Ham fans thought it'd be more than 3-0 when it got to 3-0. But let's go through the goal, because again, it comes from a set piece that then kind of gets recycled out to this position. Spurs get the ball in this position here, so we can see that we're tracking the run here. So this is Magassa at this point who's coming out to follow him. Juve, we can see, is on the run of Kudus, and then you've got Ward-Prowse, as you quite rightly stated, Sloth, in this position here. We then move it forward to frame. So Ward-Prowse has come across to cover the run of Bergvall. And then you can see Mavropanos sort of trying to make the movement then into Bergvall to kind of recover from this situation. Again, we do have a player less in this situation, so I do have a little bit of sympathy, but the intent from the West Ham players is all wrong, because as you quite rightly mentioned, 10 men, 11 men, it doesn't matter what we've had this season, we've been far too open to play through in that midfield. And it's come from a lack of accountability, it's come from a lack of discipline, and it's come from a lack of understanding of, if you go out and run and press a player, you are leaving a gap behind. So unless you are extremely coordinated and coached as a team, and you're doing it cohesively in the right situation, teams will just pick you apart. And that's exactly what Spurs do. They just play a very simple pass into the midfield. And then you can see, look, Magassa's obviously come out and chased Tell. Ward-Prowse has then come out and chased, but then again, he's still chasing. And then at that point, Ward-Prowse should recognize, okay, I should probably drop back into that situation. And even Kilman and Mavropanos, again, they're kind of just static, more so on Mavropanos. You can see that Juve's come out to cover the Kudus run. Mavropanos needs to step across in this situation. So there's a couple of people at fault for that. And then the ball gets played into Bergvall. Again, he takes a couple of touches, takes a nice touch, and then plays a pass inside. But this shouldn't have even got through. Mavropanos should not be allowing this to get through. It was way too easy for Bergvall to find his pass into Van de Ven. And again, look at the space that Van de Ven has. Kilman should be ready to block this, or ready and anticipating this from Van de Ven. And again, even someone like Jared Bowen behind Kilman there, I don't really know what he's doing in that position. It's not effective. He's kind of just dropping in, I don't know whether he's trying to be the hero or whether he's trying to, get rid of some of this pressure. He feels like he needs to do it if he's the captain. I don't know what that is, but Bowen shouldn't be in that position. And again, Van de Ven just has all the time in the world. It's too late. Our midfielders are out of shot, so they can't get there. Kilman's too slow to block it, and Van de Ven just slots it home nicely with his right foot to make it 3-0 and game over. And as I mentioned, Sloth, luckily, that is all the goals that we have to go through. But, kind of just summarising on that and summarising from the performance, are you concerned with the direction West Ham are going in under Graham Potter, or is it still too early to tell? Graham Potter continuously alludes to the fact that this is a process and, we need time. And, we've just played Chelsea and Spurs, who have had significant investment, I think, or really high level funds is what he referred to in the post-match press conference as a reason as to, or not the sole reason, but one of the reasons as to why we can't compete, is how it sounds. I'll touch on my comments on that after. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Graham Potter at the moment and the direction West Ham are heading in as a football club? Because that's now 11 goals conceded in the league from 4 games, 14 goals conceded in 5 games from all competitions. So there's real concern at West Ham that we're going to be in a very difficult situation in a few months.
I think that to blame it solely on Graham Potter is entirely disingenuous. It entirely takes away the magnitude of the problem that West Ham United face. And that man is David Sullivan. The problem is David Sullivan. Because you cannot sit there and type away and comment and say, we've had great backing from the board and Graham Potter has got all the players he wanted. No, he hasn't. And I'm not saying that every manager needs a blank checkbook to go out and sign players. They don't. Of course they don't. But I mentioned Webster and I mentioned Dunk before, because We know that Graham Potter does like a certain defender. He likes a certain type of centre back. What have we done? Absolutely nothing about it. Okay. Now, I can understand in the January window, we maybe said to him, we will give you a budget, or you can keep the budget till the summer. But where's that budget? You know, where's the money that we bid for John Duran and have completely neglected to address again a striker? Where is the investment in actual quality across the pitch? Because there is none. It's a complete and utter fallacy of recruitment and consistent problems in that level. It's not just Graham Potter, and it's not just Macaulay. It's not Maximilian Hahn. They're not the issue at the football club. The issue is the person who's signing the checks, listening to agents, and instead of listening to the football people at the club, is going, oh, that's a really hard deal to get done. I don't know if I can do that. Oh, blinky blimey. Well, it's a Saturday, isn't it? I can't get anything done. I'm gonna. It's a weekend. I don't work weekends. It's not my problem, is it? Well, your running of the football club is getting us in this position, and it's completely inarguable. And people will say, "Oh, well, Hermansen was a Potter signing." We know Potter liked him. We know that his top target was Suzuki, and even X will confirm that. X will confirm that Potter's top target was Suzuki. So I'm not saying he's, devoid of blame, but the big problem at the football club sits at the top. The fish rots from the head down. I keep saying it, but there is also bigger issues in the coaching. And I say bigger issues. There are also issues in the coaching. The biggest issue is at the top of the club, because you can have the world's best coach. You could have, I don't want to say Pep Guardiola because he's had a bit of a slump, but you could have, Maxi Flick, you could have Slot. If they don't get the players that they need or they think they need, then you've basically wasted their time. And that's what we've done. We've wasted the fan time. I've wasted my time. My favourite pub in London was closed because of the marches. So I couldn't go to my favourite pub pre-game. I had a crap day, and now I'm beginning to think, did I waste my time going? Because that's what it's become. And I love West Ham completely. However, it's getting to the point now where I'm genuinely thinking, what's the point? I'm gonna relish these boycotts because I don't have to watch this crap. And it's, I mentioned the coaching. This is basic stuff. It's like, I used to coach kids, and you would teach them to go and meet the ball. You would teach them to talk and communicate with each other, and communicate efficiently. That's a huge issue in football. Like, I know people will say, "Oh, you've got players from all over the world." It's hard to get one unit, everyone on the same page. It's not when you're on a football pitch, because you can have codes, you can have like a certain symbol. It's what the Arsenal backline used to do all the time with the hand signals. You can get this with coaching, but it's clear and obvious that this is not happening. And it's clear and obvious that something is rotten at this football club. It's rotten at pretty much every level, or has been. And we've never addressed this rot. All we do is we put a little plaster over it, hope it gets better, and ignore the problem and hope it goes away. But it doesn't, because the issue is that if we sack Graham Potter, we're probably going to get in Nuno. I think that's fair to say, because we know that David Sullivan doesn't like paying for managers. So we're going to go out and we're going to get Nuno. Nuno will address a lot of the issues. Nuno can actually coach defensively. However, we're still going to be in a situation where he plays counter-attacking football.
Yeah.
And eventually, you know, we might get another David Moyes. We might get a Forest style resurgence from the bottom of the table up into Europe. But eventually, there's going to be echoes and people going and whispers going, I'm not really enjoying the games. Okay, well, you can change that because Nuno is a very good manager. He can change that. He can recruit in a certain way and try and change his style of football to make it a bit more fun. But you have to have financial backing to do that. And that's the problem. I don't think that is ever going to be the change. You can change the manager as much as you like, but unless you're changing the way that we do things at the club, it's gonna be completely and utterly pointless.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think fantastically put, stuff. I don't really need to add much to that because we're definitely on the same page. And yeah, as you mentioned, there's issues across. Like no one is solely to blame, but as you mentioned, it very much stems from the top. And there's when we do these breakdowns, we're looking at the tactical setup and the structural issues under Graham Potter and things we can do better on the pitch. But yeah, it takes two to tango. He hasn't got the players in that we needed, so there's that issue. However, he's not using the players that he does have correctly or in the way that's maximizing the way that the squad can potentially play. Because we've got some good players in the squad. Like we're not a team that should be fighting relegation, in my opinion. But because of the way we're playing in the moment and obviously the surroundings of what's happening, that's an issue. I think my biggest, I completely agree with everything you've said about David Sullivan, the board, the way the West Ham is run. Completely agree. With Graham Potter specifically, the biggest issue I have with him is a lack of accountability that I'm starting to see as a recurring theme in his post-match conferences. Against Chelsea, it was, they're a Champions League, they're a Super Cup winning team. They've got all this investment. It's really difficult to compete against them. He thought we played well in spells, but then, it's too early to tell. Okay, fine, we can write that one off. You then got Spurs, so you've played your second biggest home derby of the season, arguably, another big London derby, and you lose 3-0, and you lose 3-0 in that manner. That can't really happen. You can't keep then giving excuses of, actually Spurs have had a lot of investment. They're playing in the Champions League. Spurs finished below us last season or on par with us last season. It's not an excuse. It's not an excuse at all. And you cannot make excuses for losing 3-0 at home to someone like Spurs, regardless of, whether we're amazing and Spurs are crap or whether we're crap and Spurs are amazing. How many times have we lost to, at home to Spurs by more than 3 goals in the last 20, 30 years? It can't be that many from my recollection. We've always competed well. We've always done well, regardless of the situation. Spurs were competing for the title 7-8 years ago at the London Stadium. We beat them 1-0 when we were in a relegation scrap. It doesn't matter. You for those games in particular, there are no excuses for me. For teams against, games against Man City, Liverpool away, it's obviously different. It's completely different kettle of fish. But in this circumstance, you can't use that as an excuse, in my opinion. And, it doesn't then bring into, we beat Forest. Okay, fine. What about the other performances we've had? What about losing 3-0 to Sunderland? What about going to Wolves away and completely crumbling in the cup and now we're out of the cup? So those are the issues I have. And the longer it goes on, the more Graham Potter continues to take less accountability of what's going on. That's the issue I have. But as you mentioned, nothing's going to change until it changes up top, because we're just going to have a cycle of temporary fixes to permanent solutions is basically what's going to happen. And as you mentioned, someone like Nuno could definitely come in and revamp this squad and get us playing a little bit better and get the results and keep us up happily. But what about the next season when he doesn't get the investment and there's the issues and we're cycling again? So it's just going to continue, which is why the protests are really important. Do I think they're going to change things in that immediate impact? No, because we've done it before. But it has to happen. We can't just sit down and allow it to happen or continue to allow it to happen, because that's when we'll continue to find ourselves in a vicious cycle. And, fans are more important than owners sometimes think. And that can, often prompt some change. But we'll see what happens with that in the near future. Obviously, it's not good right now. I think we're in the bottom 3 as things stand, going into, a couple of what you would say are winnable games, especially the Crystal Palace at home game on Saturday, who have had a little bit of a tough time themselves. So we'll see what happens in that game. But yeah, we're going to leave it there for today. Make sure you leave a like on the video if you enjoyed the breakdown. And yeah, we'll be back in the midweek for the preview of the Crystal Palace game. Hopefully we can get 3 points, get back on track, and get ourselves away from the relegation zone, because the more it goes on, the more scared I'm getting. I'm sure you're the same, Slough. But yeah, make sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel for more content, and until next time, Slough.
When you're